Welcome here to my little presentation on system security. And today I'll try to dig into what system security consists of. So we need to get a broad overview of all the components and what security elements we can implement in order to secure our systems. So I don't know if you've ever wondered how and why we should keep systems secure. Well, we have somebody who wants to attack our system. So this is our attacker. So imagine the attacker wants to get in. So they use the most effective way, and the most effective way can be to craft an email and put it in an email, send it after doing some research on the company, in what types and formats they use and prefer, and then tailor this very specifically to somebody with perhaps privileged access to systems on a company. So they will send it and they will cross their fingers and pray to somebody to that somebody on this company will click this email, perhaps a CEO or somebody that are just below them, somebody with access rights. And what they will do is, in this email, when they click it, they will inject some malware, and this malware perhaps exploit some vulnerabilities and connect to a another host and be able to be a backdoor into the systems. And this is ultimately caused, or the biggest risk here is that we have some human factors, and human behavior will pose a risk to our systems. We also have software that is installed in systems, and software also poses a big risk because software can contain bugs, and bugs that are not properly patched or updated will eventually could turn into some vulnerabilities, serious vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and then we should always remember to update. So let's try to go a little more into detail of the system here that the attacker is trying to exploit. So what we are looking at when we look at the system or system security in general, well, we have to consider ways that we can handle an incident. An incident when somebody tries to hack our system, well, we need to be prepared that we can control this contamination and eradicate it, and we can decouple it from the systems, and we can effectively restore the systems and get it back and running, because it's critical to the business that we are functioning. So especially if something that is mission critical gets injected and somebody presses a wrong link and malware is inserted into the systems, well, we need to have some incident handling on the spot. So, or already handy. So we also have configuration. That's where we can do our most of our daily work, that we ensure that systems are configured correctly, that we have the right amount of privileges, right amount of file permissions, the right authentication mechanisms. And when we also want to ensure our systems are secure, we also want to monitor them. We want to monitor that anything is not modified without our knowing or unauthorized, and that our data is protected and safe, and even the mechanisms that are protecting this, so file permissions and access rights, that they are not modified without authorization. So we need to monitor the systems. We need to monitor what services get installed, because these services can be an eventual backdoor, as we see. So we need to ensure that we have the full picture of our systems. And we also need to manage our users, so we need to provide them with the correct password policies and handle their way of authenticating. We need to keep that up to date. We need to keep it secure and as accessible and available so our systems are available in a secure manner through secure, centralized and predictable ways, with the appropriate amount of encryption and encryption methods, protecting our systems in depth. So let's go a little bit more into detail here. So first of all, or as I've mentioned before, that the main objective here is to minimize unauthorized access to our systems. and we want to implement the correct policies that enforce that we don't get this authorized access. So we want to keep our systems accessible, we want to enforce the right system rights, we want to keep the right data permissions, and we want to recover from failures. More or less what I just covered. So let's try to look away, as I've discussed previously, that we can effectively use, or we should effectively monitor our systems, and thereby we can effectively implement ways or controls in our system network interface that helps us achieve this goal of both scanning and monitoring, but also preventing. So we need to configure these systems so they are not easily accessible and only accessible to the right host, ports, connections, etc. So I will just broadly here go into the monitoring part, and then we'll try to look at some examples here where we can see the hosts, how we can scan hosts, so we can ensure that they are we have full visibility of what hosts are on the system, so we don't have somebody popping out that should not be there. And then we have so let's try to look at that and get their IP addresses. So an effective tool for that is using Nmap, and we can use this Nmap SP that will allow us to get this result. So we see here Nmap, if we run that, we will see what hosts are currently on the system here. So I scan my home web, and we see a different kind of hosts presented to us here. So we get seven hosts in total. So another way here is that we are enabling. We also just quickly looking here how many hosts are up. So here we are actually looking at another address. So that's why it's not 7 here. And we also can use these very verbose if it's so Nmap is a tool that can scan effectively, but it can also take a long time if it has to scan multiple hosts and multiple systems. So we can implement ways of and the output is also long. So we can, for example, if you want to monitor the current status, we can use these tags here. So very verbose, and then we can VV and use the SN for scanning for host, and then we can use the -T4 for speeding up, and then we use the grep up for more precise or like reduced output. Let's try to look at how we can configure Nmap to scan for ports. Ports are also incredibly important to systems. So ports this is where the services are connecting outwards. So if we have a malicious actor, they will exploit these. If they want to get unauthorized access or access to the system, they will explore or explode these systems. They want to use these in an unauthorized way, so they will perhaps install some software or use a port, and this port we are able to scan for when we're using these port scans. So also, when I don't know if you have some software capabilities or history of doing software, well, you will see you have some standard ports that are 3306 for MySQL's database server. So you will they are in a range that is known, or as a small range. So you eventually, some hackers here. So as we see here, we can see that we have some ports here that are above 1000. So we should actually also seek to scan up here at above 1000. So normally what we call script kiddies, not so advanced attackers, they will perhaps do a scan here, and they will look for open ports here. But eventually, if you're more advanced, you would try to implement some ports here, because these are perhaps not so obviously or standardized in most scans. So, and they will start with scanning these. So most services are below 1000, and you can also configure your services to use ports that are above. So you will potentially make them more invisible to if a hacker will scan your network. So we need to scan our network before they do. And here we can see a scan that Nmap produces of several ports and what the services are here. We have SSH, port 2020, and different kind of services, and HTTP here, 80, and FTP. So, let's just go back here. So and eventually here you can also get some Synac here, and you can see here I have actually configured here, so you will perhaps notice that there are some very weird looking ports here, 1 2 3 4 5. So, and we have elite. So funny story that I forgot that I used a software called Port Sentry to help me make some honey traps. So eventually I got these in a scan, and I was thought, oh no, what are these? So these are ports that can be used as like for some software listening on them, and then they will try to trigger hackers into try to explore these ports, and then you could detect if some kind of scanning was going on your systems. So from ports, we can go into services, and services are working on the application layer, and they can be very dangerous. So the ports, so the services use the ports to communicate with other hosts that want to use these services. And here we can see the services here listed here, and we just use the O here, so it will also scan for actually the operating system also. So we will do a very wide scan here. So we will see we are running Linux, and we are what kind of version. It will try to make some guesses based on some patterns and some known patterns we have connecting. So it's very effective Nmap and very widely used to discover and monitor networks. So you want to be discovering your network before the attacker is doing this. So here we can also SV. We can perhaps get here web-based enterprise management SIM. So here we get a lot of information here. And yeah, we can also do some other scans here. And we should eventually consider what services we are running, and then consult some documentation based on the services if we have some unknown ports, and then look for, or at least if we're scanning an enterprise network, then identify what are high risk, what are low risk. So here you can look for what compliance standards they are corresponding to, and we do that by effective Google search. So let's go a bit more into incident handling. So as I've talked before, we have attackers that are seeking to exploit our systems. So eventually we can use a framework that's called metasploitable. And metasploitable is a good way to pen test and ensure that your system is to ensure some system capabilities and explore some ways that attackers potentially can get through your system. So here we want to exploit the SMB protocol, and we effectively go into Metasploit, and then they have some information and helping us exploit these attacks. So they have some exploit signatures. We can use Metasploit to search that, and then we can configure what host we are wanting to exploit here. So we configure this host to get exploited, and then we write the exploit command, and then we then it scans here and execute here. We get this output for the scanned host, and then we can log into the system through this terminal here. So we can, through using Metasploit, and then we can check who am I? I'm a nice guy. So let's just go a little bit more into gaining root access using Metasploit. So again here is the we look at the host here. This is the victim host. So we see here what is our victim host. So we configure Metasploitable to use that address here. So 2203 and here. So we go in here, and then we set the R host here, and then we exploit, and then it starts performing the exploit here. So we see that started reverse TCP handler, and then command shell opened on. So we are exploiting here from this to this, and then we see here we are in the terminal here. So we don't get very much information here from the terminal, but we are in here. Like it's only string based, and then we can potentially access the shadow files if they are not correctly. We have the root access. So if we have the root access, we have very high amount of privileges. So we can access the shadow files with the passwords, and then we can connect and send back the passwords, and then we can use some password cracking of the computer, and then we can send it back using this port here. And then the our attacker here has the shadow file and the shadow components here, so we see here verify that we have the shadow files. And another exploit here. So another way to a way to use metasploitable is to like search, or we can use in the some other CVE database, and then we can search for some exploits. Sorry here. So let's just go back. And then we see some different kind of exploits here that we can, and then we just, what is important here, that we have the operating system that we're exploiting here, so we can more or less confirm that we can actually perform this that we're searching for. But if they take correct operating system and an exploit, then we have a path into the systems. And here we use the in the metasploitable framework, after searching more broadly, we go in and then we find the exploit here. So they are providing the exploit through the metasploitable framework, and then we can utilize this exploit and then go into the system. And we can use this. We set here, we configure set lhost, and we set show payloads, and then we can exploit here, set payload, use this command, and then we will eventually exploit the system. And yeah, we now have connection here, full connection exploit. Perhaps you have to run it sometimes just to get it in there, but then we have the connection here to our victim. Here we see that we are in. So this is some ways that we are, and we confirm here who am I, I'm root. So these are ways that we can get into the system and know how and test our systems for exploits. And just let's get into some ways we can configure the system. So also, as we saw before, that it's important that we configure privileges, so we don't, when system are exploited or some user is trying to configure the systems, that we only provide the minimum needed privileges. So if we imagine a company here of different kind of admins here, so what the admin should not have, each admin should not have rights to other systems. So this is very broad access, and we should only configure like system that is within their scope of department. And a way to do this is about configuring the sudo file, so we can add different kind of groups here, and we can add different kind of so we can add an admin to the admin1 group. So you could imagine that we have admin for sales, admin for HR, and then what we do is that we have a very powerful tool that is called the sudo list. So the sudo is actually able to very much separate different kind of permissions to run commands, access from locations on the system here through the sudo file. So we can eventually configure that we only need some kind of restriction to this IP address, our local IP address, so we can perhaps only allow local access to sudo, so elevated privileges. So if a root gets in, they will eventually only be able to do some root access, if root privileged access commands, if they are on this IP network, or they're connecting from that. That's so, and then we can also restrict some users here, so they are only able to, so we see here that we have restricted them to only be on the operational net. So we will provide this command sudo l-u, and then we can verify that this verify what the sudos are doing, what rights they have. And we can also configure, for example, printing, that we have somebody that can only perform printing sudo rights. We also have some power operation here, and we also have some net config. So they only have the sudo rights to perhaps to the route, to the ifconfig, to the ping, to the DH client, and commands, and they can the other ones have reboot, power off, it's only power up, and then LPC, LPIM, and then we configure their groups here, what they are allowed to. So they are net up all in all printing up. Oh, let's just look here. So yeah, and they actually, we should also ensure that they do not that is only limited to those. So we, for example, sudo, he should not root, should not have access to doing those commands. Exactly. Also, a very important part of it, not allowing access. And here we are testing here, so we see that NetUp is only able to do route, if config, IP tables. I have put sudo rights. I have sudo rights for these. Yeah, and then the print up here, we also confirm the print up. So we also have some other ways to configure some ways of ensuring that, so we can also configure systems to only have IP. So this is a part of the configuration policies. Also to manually set IPs on the network for the systems here in system security. And we also configure host firewalls. IP tables, we can do that. So I hope you, so this was kind of like an overview into what so like a deep dive and some a broader overview into the system security, what we need to do and what we need to be prepared for. So I hope you liked the video. So please subscribe if you could like some more, and support my channel here, and give me a thumbs up. Thank you for now.